Hi everyone. So this video is about how to use Google Scholar. So first off, to get to Google Scholar, you just type in scholar.google.com. Google Scholar is a great resource to find peer-reviewed journal articles for your final research paper. So the peer-reviewed process means that other people have reviewed the work. So what happens when, let's say, a professor like me submits their work? They've done a research project and they've done data analysis and submitted it to a journal. The peer review process then starts for those journals that participate in the peer review process. The journal or the editor will invite scholars or other academics to review the work anonymously and basically say whether they think it should be published or not. So you submit an article, you usually get 3 reviewers, and you can either get published or you can get a revise and resubmit, which is the usual process. You'll get comments saying, well, what about this? And have you thought about this? And you might want to do this, or maybe you're missing an important part of the current literature. You need to look up this article and add that in. So you get comments for R&Rs or revise and resubmits, or you might just get a rejection and say, okay, that article is not good enough for publication. So that's the peer-reviewed process. And so that process tends to produce good, high-quality work. And so once you're published, you'll have articles, and a lot of the times those articles will show up in Google Scholar, sometimes for free. So Google Scholar is a good resource. There are some articles that you cannot access if you're not logged into your university account, or maybe it's hard to get to. But if you use Google Scholar, you can find them sometimes for free, like I said. So this is a great resource. So I am going to use your research project topic selections as an example of how to find some articles. So let's just say that you're looking at death penalty. So if your topic is death penalty, you probably need to expand upon that for your future paper. So what about the death penalty? You'd go over to Google Scholar and you can write death penalty, and you're going to have to write more because you're going to get too many results here. So you'll see you have almost 2 million results. But let's say you're interested in death penalty and political affiliation. So maybe you're wondering, Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, however you want to define that. Is there a correlation between political affiliation or views and the death penalty? You can see that narrows down the results quite a bit. You only have 110,000 results, and then if you filter that to the most recent couple of years, let's do since 2019, you'll have even more relevant results. So you'll see here the first hit or result that you get would be capital punishment in Brazil, exploring factors that predict public support for the death penalty. And one of those factors looks like they're looking at political parties. They also have other things they're looking at, but this one might be a good resource for you to look at if your topic is death penalty and political affiliation. You would open that up, and hopefully it's not behind a paywall. And this one's not so good. You can read the entire article, and this is a great journal. Journal of Contemporary Criminal Justice is a peer-reviewed journal. It has a fairly high impact factor. So it is an influential journal. It's a great resource to use if this would be your topic. The way you then begin to look at papers, they all have the same format. So this should be a reminder, but just about every paper will have an abstract. An abstract has the basic problem they're looking at. How did they go about looking at that problem, and then what did they find? So here, I haven't read this. This is my first time seeing this article, but you'll see. All right, so the basic problem is we need to know more about public support for the death penalty. They looked at individual level cross-sectional data. And they found a significant majority of Brazilians supported the death penalty. And then, lastly, also, they'll usually say, okay, this is what needs to be done in the future. So then they might have that sentence toward the end here. So the abstract is, you can think about it like a mini paper. It'll break down all the different parts of the article that are to follow in one short little paragraph. So the actual paper starts here. You have an introduction, and you'll have this in your final research paper as well. The introduction gives you a brief introduction of the problem. And then it might lead up to research questions at this point. So these scholars looked at, do Brazilians favor the death penalty, and what variables predict their attitudes towards the death penalty. You then might move to theoretical explanations. So this would be from your crime theory classes in the past. They might explore deterrence like they did here. You might look at life course criminology, biological factors, environmental factors, micro versus macro level explanations. So a lot of the times papers will have theoretical potential explanations for what they think they might find. And then the next section in an article would be the method section. So you're not going to have the method section in your paper, but in an article, when you're reading through the articles for your paper, know that most of your articles that you run across should or will have this. So the methods are basically the data that they're using. So you'll have your data source, and then you'll have your measures. So going back to the questions, how did they measure support for the death penalty? How did they measure crime? How did they measure age? Because you can measure age differently. You can use actual age in years. You can use an estimated age. You could use a range of age, like 0 to 20, 21 through 40, 41 through 50, so on. So all of this section is, how did you measure gender, employment, marital status, years of schooling, class status. So it's just more about the actual data itself. The next section of a journal article is the analytic strategy. So that would be, what was your plan on how you were going to analyze your data? So when you're reading through the articles, the analytic strategy may be past your comprehension level at this point, and that's okay. I want you to know that in advance. So you can just skim over the analytic strategy part. This is going to be very detailed about the specific analyses that they're planning on using, and talking about things beyond the scope of what you need to know for your paper. Next, you'll have a section that starts describing the data, and you may be able to understand some of this part, and you will have to understand at least the descriptive statistics of these papers. And don't worry, we can always talk about that in the future too, and I can help you with that. Next is the results. So when you're reading the results section, you want to focus on the big picture. Some of these things, like the chi-square and the significance, perhaps you may not be 100% clear on that, and that's okay. What I recommend doing, especially once you get to the results, if the tables are confusing to you, just read the actual text. So this top part is going to be explaining what is displayed in the tables. So as long as you understand it, whether it's from the text or from the table, take notes that way, and you will need to read through the results section. So this is a little bit more just results. And so then after the results, you usually have your discussion and conclusion. It might look a little different depending on what article you're using, but it might have a implications for future policy. It might be labeled like that. It might be labeled just future research. But you'll see that it's basically all the same. The discussion is going to wrap up what was found. And so they might have a slightly different variations. So like this one says conclusion and recommendation. And then you have your their references here at the bottom. So going back to the discussion and conclusion, those can sometimes be together or separate, just depending on the article itself. But you can use the discussion and conclusion to verify that you understood what the article said, because the discussion and conclusion is going to refer back to the results that you see up here, and it'll tell you the main takeaways. So the discussion is very important for you to read through and be able to summarize. So you don't have to worry about that quite yet. We'll get to it later, and I will cover this again later. But I just wanted to show you the basic parts of a journal article and how to find them in Google Scholar. If you go to a second one here, okay, this one is not available just by Google Scholar. You may need to look through this through the university library, but I'll go to one that I see looks like it's available. So this one is on researchgate.net. And this one's from the American Psychological Association, but you'll see it's very similar. So this one is not labeled, but this is the same, this is an abstract. So an abstract, it'll either be labeled or it'll be on the top in a smaller, there's not an actual box here, but you'll see that it's it clearly stands apart from the rest. Again, here it's not labeled, but this is the introduction because it's the first actual paragraph of the article. And they're still talking about, why is what they're looking at important here. It's part of their intro. Now, this is called the method section, again, just like the other one. So this is talking about their data, how they use their survey questionnaire, so specifics on the data. This is more about the data, so sampling. Results, so that lines up with the article I showed you just a minute ago, talking about the results, and then they'll have tables corresponding with those results. And then we should see a discussion and conclusion section coming up here. This is more results. All right, so here's the discussion. And here's the conclusion. And you'll see on this one, it doesn't have a separate, implications for the future or policy implications, things like that. I have not seen this article before, before showing it to you just now for the lecture, but sometimes these sections are embedded within the conclusion itself. And then lastly, you have the references section. So those are the general parts of an article. If you guys have any questions, please let me know.